My name is Marlena Calloway. I was 34 years old on the night my marriage ended. Not when I signed the separation agreement. Not when I moved the last box into a new apartment 3 miles away. Not even when I finally said out loud to another human being what I had seen. My marriage ended on the sidewalk outside Aria on South Tryon Street in Charlotte, North Carolina, on the evening of October 4th, 2024, our 4th wedding anniversary. At approximately 8:52 in the evening, when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket and I looked down at the screen and read, "Happy anniversary, baby. I know tonight got complicated with work, but I wanted you to know I love you more than anything. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Come home soon." I read those 31 words standing in the amber glow of a street lamp, I with the October air cool against my face, and the faint sound of a jazz quartet drifting from somewhere down the block. Then I lifted my eyes to the glass front of the restaurant 15 feet in front of me. Past the potted olive trees flanking the entrance, past the couple finishing their wine at a two-top near the window. And I watched my husband reach across the table and tuck a strand of dark hair behind Simone Park's ear, and then lean forward and kiss her. It wasn't long. It wasn't obscene. It was worse than both of those things. It was easy. It was the kiss of two people who have kissed many times before and expect to kiss many times again. He pulled back. He said something. She laughed. And then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The charcoal blazer I had watched him hang carefully back in our closet that same morning, the one he said he was saving for a dinner he'd take me to soon, and he put his phone away. He had just texted me, "Happy anniversary, baby," from a table where he was kissing another woman on our wedding anniversary. I stood on that sidewalk for close to 5 minutes. A family walked past me, 2 kids arguing about something, a father with a diaper bag, a mother carrying a coffee cup at nearly 9 in the evening the way mothers of young children do. I stepped aside to let them pass. I watched through the restaurant glass. And then I turned and walked back to my car on the next block. To understand what that moment cost me, and I mean the full accounting of it, every dollar and every year and every version of a future that I had to dismantle and rebuild, you have to go back to before Derek. You have to go back to who I was before I became someone's wife. Before we get into this, please like and subscribe. But only if this story truly resonates with you, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, the second of 2 daughters born to Patricia and Ron Voss. My mother taught English at Page High School for 26 years and believed in precise language the way some people believe in weather, as something fundamental, something you ignored at your own peril. She corrected grammar at the dinner table. She circled incorrect apostrophes on birthday cards from relatives. She was warm, and she was exacting in equal measure, and I spent a significant portion of my childhood trying to determine which one was operating in any given moment. My father, Ron, was an electrician who ran his own small operation, 3 employees, a white van with a magnetic sign on the door, residential and light commercial work across Guilford County. He was not a complicated man. He believed in keeping your word, being where you said you'd be, and fixing whatever was broken in front of you. When he shook your hand, he meant it permanently. I think I inherited more from him than I understood for a long time. My sister Brooke was 3 years ahead of me and had always operated in a louder key. Student council, spring musical, her name called at graduation for the Academic Excellence Award. None of it was performance. Brooke was genuinely capable, but she also understood how to be seen in a way that I never did and never particularly wanted to. I was the one in the back corner of the classroom with a sketchbook, redesigning the covers of textbooks that bored me, building elaborate maps of imaginary cities in the margins of my math notebooks. My mother used to describe me as interior, and she meant it as a gentle warning, and I received it as a reasonable assessment. I went to NC State on a merit scholarship in 2008. Graphic design and information science, double major, 4 years, graduated with a 3.81 GPA and $19,400 in student loan debt, and a job offer already in hand from a marketing agency in Charlotte at $38,500 a year. I drove down I-85 in a 2004 Ford Escort with everything I owned distributed between the back seat and the trunk, and a garment bag hanging from the rear passenger hook. I took exit 11 and found my way to a one-bedroom apartment in Noda, North Davidson, and felt something I had not anticipated feeling, like myself. Like the particular shape of who I was had finally found a space that fit it. Over the next 7 years, I built something. I moved from the agency to an in-house design role at Atrium Health, where I spent 2 years rebuilding their patient portal interface from the ground up and learned that what I actually loved was the gap between how designers imagined users would behave and how humans actually behaved when left alone in front of a screen. I got certified in UX design through the Nielsen Norman Group. I moved laterally to a fintech startup that eventually got acquired, and then to Pinnacle Financial Technologies on College Street, where I was hired as senior UX designer in the spring of 2018 at $87,000 a year with 2 direct reports, a project budget of my own, and a manager who understood that the best thing she could do for me was leave me alone. By 2019, I had a 401k with $34,000 in it, a lease on a good apartment in Dilworth with hardwood floors and a clawfoot tub, a best friend named Jade Okafor, who I'd met at a design industry networking event in 2014 when we'd both been marooned at the same end of the catering table with identical expressions of mild skepticism. Jade was a brand strategist at a firm on East Trade Street, brilliant in a way that was fully assembled and not in progress, and the only person whose opinion I trusted without reservation. I had a life that was mine in every meaningful sense. I was not waiting for anything. I was not lonely in the particular way people assume a single 31-year-old woman must be lonely. And then I walked into an industry mixer at the Westin on West Trade Street in the spring of 2017, and a man in a navy jacket laughed at a comment I made about load-bearing walls during a real estate development panel discussion, and the rest of the room went briefly out of focus. Derek Calloway was 30 years old. He worked in commercial real estate development. He and his college roommate Marcus Briggs had started Callaway and Marsh Commercial Properties 4 years earlier, and were young and hungry, and landing contracts that should have taken a firm their size twice as long to reach. He was handsome in a way that took me a beat to register, the way you sometimes don't notice something in your peripheral vision until it moves. He was funny, which I cared about more than I admitted. He was attentive in a way that felt architectural, deliberate and structural rather than reflexive. He asked my name and used it in the next sentence, which sounds like a small thing and is not a small thing at all. He asked for my number before I had thought of a reason not to give it to him. We dated for 18 months. He met Jade at a dinner in January 2018, and she texted me afterward. Okay, he's real. From Jade, this was essentially a standing ovation. I met his mother, Renata Calloway, that spring. A retired paralegal who lived in a large house in Ballantyne with silk flower arrangements in every room because, as she told me over the first dinner she cooked for us, real flowers required attention she didn't have time for. I told Derek on the drive home that I found his mother genuinely interesting. He laughed and said she was a lot. I said I could handle a lot. He proposed in March 2019 in Asheville at a small Italian restaurant in the River Arts District that he'd reserved exclusively for the two of us, with a candle on the table and Ella Fitzgerald coming quietly from speakers somewhere I couldn't locate. The ring was a 3/4-carat cushion cut on a thin yellow gold band. It was exactly what I would have designed if someone had asked me to design my own ring, which no one had, which meant he had either paid extraordinarily close attention or enlisted Jade. I later found out he had done both. We married on October 4th, 2020, at the Duke Mansion in Myers Park. 23 guests because of COVID restrictions. Jade stood beside me in a sage green dress and cried during the vows in a way she would later deny entirely. My father shook Derek's hand for a long time and looked directly at him and didn't say anything, which from Ron Voss was the fullest possible endorsement. My mother straightened my veil right before I walked and said, "You chose well." She meant Han with its friction and negotiation and the particular work of learning how someone else's silences function. We figured out how to divide Thanksgiving between families and what his version of tired meant versus mine, and whether 68 or 71 was the right temperature for the thermostat at night. We cooked dinner on weeknights and went to the Atherton Mill Farmers Market on Saturday mornings and visited Renata for Sunday dinner, where she prepared excellent food and offered opinions about my kitchen organization that were not solicited. Derek would find my hand under the table when she started in on something, and I read that as solidarity. I understand now that it was management. He had been managing his mother and the women adjacent to him simultaneously for a long time, out in the particular way of men who are kind enough to avoid confrontation and careless enough to let avoidance accumulate. The first thing that felt wrong arrived quietly in the fall of 2021. Callaway and Marsh had landed a significant contract, a mixed-use development on the south side of Charlotte, somewhere in the range of $38 million in project value. This meant long hours and late dinners, and a schedule that stopped, including me in the organic way the first year's schedule had. I understood this completely. I was not someone who required constant access to her husband. I had my own work and my own team and my own satisfactions. I gave him space without being asked, because I believed that was what good partners did. What I noticed first was not an absence. It was a change in language. Derek had always been specific, precise about where he was going, who he was meeting, what the purpose was. Not because I asked. I almost never asked, but because that was his default register, the way some people use proper nouns when vaguer language would do just as well. Dinner with Davis and the Foundry Group. Drinks with Marcus after the sidewalk on Park Road. The architects are coming Tuesday at 9. I might be late home. Sometime in the fall of 2021, the proper nouns drained out of his language. Investor dinner. Sight thing. Work stuff, delivered in a tone designed to close rather than open. I noticed it the way you notice when background music stops. Not immediately, but with a subsequent disorientation, a sense that something in the atmosphere has shifted without announcement. I told myself, this is what scaling a company looks like. He's stretched thin. People get shorthand when they're overwhelmed. I was fluent in every charitable explanation. Then there was the phone. Derek had always left his phone face up. On the coffee table, the kitchen counter, the nightstand. He didn't guard it because it apparently hadn't occurred to him that it needed guarding. Starting in the winter of 2021, the phone went into his pocket. Not dramatically. He didn't become someone who clutched it or made a production of keeping it close. But I'm someone who tracks patterns, and the pattern had changed. When his phone buzzed in the evenings, he angled the screen away with a motion so practiced it felt unconscious. He started taking calls in the garage, just standing out there in the cold, talking in a low voice with the door to the kitchen pulled shut. I told myself things about this too. I told myself I had a tendency toward hypervigilance that my therapist had gently flagged. Dr. Patricia Huang, an East Moorhead Street practice I'd started seeing in late 2021 for what I'd described to my insurance company as generalized anxiety. I told myself that a man who came home every night and still made coffee the way I liked it and still remembered the name of my first grade teacher was not a man who needed to be suspected. I told myself that building a case from incidentals was its own kind of betrayal. Jade and I had lunch at Optimist Food Hall in February 2022. I told her about the vague calendar entries and the phone behavior over grain bowls we didn't particularly taste. She put her fork down and looked at me with the specific expression she reserves for the moments when she's deciding between honesty and kindness. Has he actually given you a reason not to trust him? She said. No, I said. Then trust him until he does. I tried. Genuinely. But the trying had the quality of swimming in a direction I wasn't certain about, working against a current I couldn't source. In October 2022, Derek told me he was flying to Atlanta for 2 nights, a commercial development conference at the Marriott Marquis on Peachtree Center Avenue. I helped him pack. I folded the gray polo and the charcoal pants and put them in the rolling suitcase he used for overnight trips. And I kissed him goodbye at the front door on a Thursday morning and watched the Uber take him down Crestview Drive. On Friday evening, I stopped for gas at a station on South Boulevard, the one with the green awning next to the nail salon. The silver BMW that pulled up on the other side of the pump was identical to Derek's company car. Same model, same color, same year, same style of temporary parking tag in the rear window. I glanced over the way you look at a car that might belong to someone you know. Then I looked again. The man in the driver's seat, leaning across the console toward whoever was in the passenger seat, had my husband's exact jaw. His haircut, the gray polo I had folded into his suitcase myself 36 hours earlier. I sat very still. The interior light in the BMW was insufficient. The pump finished. I told myself that silver BMWs were extremely common vehicles in Charlotte, North Carolina. I told myself the polo was a generic item of clothing manufactured in the tens of thousands. I told myself I was not going to become the woman who loses her composure in a gas station parking lot over what amounted to a coincidence I couldn't even confirm. I drove home. I called Derek's cell from the driveway. He answered on the third ring. There was background sound behind him, something that carried the ambient blur of a hotel bar. He sounded easy and unhurried. The conference sessions had run long. Atlanta was strange in October. Still humid, even this late in the year. He asked about my day with genuine-sounding warmth. I said I thought I saw his car on South Boulevard. He laughed. Not defensively, lightly, like a man genuinely amused by a reasonable mistake. I've been in Atlanta since yesterday morning, babe. Well, you probably saw the same model. Those things are everywhere down here, too. You're right, I said. I'm sorry, he said. Don't apologize. It was sweet that I thought about him. He said he'd be home Saturday afternoon. He said he loved me. I hung up and sat in the driveway with the engine off and the windows fogging slightly and let the silence of the car be what it was. Not crying. Just sitting with what I could not yet name. I told Dr. Patricia Huang about it the following Thursday. She is a small, still woman with close-cropped gray hair and the habit of holding eye contact slightly longer than comfort requires when she's waiting for you to hear something you've already said out loud. She asked what I thought I saw. I said I wasn't sure. She waited. Then she said, Marlena, you've described your husband as attentive and reliable and kind in almost every session since you started seeing me. But whenever I ask you how your marriage feels right now, you use words like uncertain, static, like something's been moved and I can't tell where. Those are not the words of a woman who feels safe in her own home. What do you think that gap is telling you? I didn't have an answer that day, but the question sat in me, the way an unanswered email sits at the top of your inbox, visible every time you open anything, not going anywhere, requiring eventual response. I started paying attention differently, not obsessively. I want to be precise about this because I think there's an important distinction between a woman who becomes consumed by surveillance and a woman who begins to apply her actual professional skills to her actual life. I am a UX designer by training and disposition. I understand how to observe behavior without contaminating the data. I began noting what was actually happening and distinguishing it from what I expected or wanted to be happening, and I tracked the discrepancy without rushing to interpretation. I let the data accumulate before I built the case. The data accumulated. Derek's income, which we had jointly planned around his disclosed $180,000 annual salary at Callaway and Marsh, was producing small, unexplained expansions in our lifestyle. A watch I didn't recognize on his wrist one morning, now which he called an early birthday gift to himself in a sentence structured to preempt questions. A weekend charge on a joint credit card at a resort in the North Carolina mountains, somewhere outside Boone, that he mentioned as a client thing. I forget to tell you about these sometimes, in a tone designed to close the topic without opening it. I noted these things. I did not act. Then, in July 2023, Derek mentioned a new hire at Callaway and Marsh during dinner on a Tuesday. A project coordinator. 29 years old, moved up from Atlanta for the position. Name was Simone Park. He mentioned her exactly the way you mention someone who is going to appear peripherally in future stories. Brief, contextual, designed to feel like background noise. Her name appeared in one sentence about the office, and then again, the following week, in a story about a difficult client meeting, always as a supporting reference, always in passing, always peripheral. That evening, while Derek was in the garage on the phone, I typed Simone Park into the LinkedIn search bar. Her photo loaded immediately. She was 29 and beautiful in the specific way that looks effortless because it has long since stopped requiring effort. Present in herself, comfortable in the frame of the image. Georgia Tech undergraduate. 3 years at a commercial development firm in Atlanta's Buckhead district. 847 connections. I looked at her photo for longer than I needed to. Then I closed the app, put my phone face down on the nightstand, and lay very still when Derek came in from the garage 20 minutes later and said the call had been a supplier issue. Boring stuff. Sorry he was out there so long. I said no worries. I turned off my bedside lamp. I believed approximately 40% of what I told myself over the following months. The other 60% I kept in a quiet room I didn't visit out loud. By September 2023, the deleted texts had started. Not the whole phone. Derek was careful. Always careful. Individual conversation threads, cleared in a way that left arithmetic gaps in the list. I noticed because I notice gaps. The thread count would be 15, and then the next time his phone sat on the counter while he showered, it would be 11, with no new conversations visible to explain the subtraction. I noted this without commenting on it. I simply noted it. On September 14th, 2023, our third wedding anniversary, Derek took me to Bonterra Dining and Wine Room on Cleveland Avenue. He had made the reservation 3 weeks in advance. He brought a card with a handwritten note inside. 3 years and you are still the most capable, interesting, and beautiful person in my life. I don't deserve you, but I'm going to spend whatever's left of mine trying to. He said it while looking directly at me across the candlelit table. He was not performing. Whatever he felt in that moment was real. I've thought about this at great length, and I still believe it. I think it's entirely possible to love someone and deceive them at the same time, in the particular way of people who have compartmentalized so completely that they've stopped recognizing the compartments as the same house. I kept that card in my nightstand. I found it again after everything fell apart. I sat with it for a long time. I still don't know exactly what to do with it. What I didn't know on September 14th, 2023, was that the night before, our actual third anniversary, September 13th, Derek had told me he was working late. I didn't know what I would find 7 months later, Sitting at the desk in the home office on a Tuesday afternoon in April 2024, scrolling through a Callaway and Marsh account statement Derek had left open on the shared computer to print something and then gotten a call and walked away from. There it was, in the itemized column of a company credit card I hadn't known existed. A charge from Aria Restaurant on South Tryon Street. September 13th, 2023. $412. I sat with that entry for a long time without moving. The amount, the date, the restaurant. Derek's restaurant. The one where the host knew him by name. The one he'd taken me to for 4 separate dinners in the past 2 years, because he called it the best room in Charlotte for an important evening. He had been at Area on September 13th, 2023, our actual 3rd anniversary, while telling me he was working late. Then he had come home, slept beside me in our bed, woken up the next morning, and taken me to Bonterra to celebrate. He had written me a card that said I was the most interesting person in his life. He had looked at me directly across a candlelit table. This is the moment I think of when people ask me about the reversal, the hinge point, the before and after. It wasn't the sidewalk outside Aria months later. And it was a Tuesday afternoon alone in a home office, looking at a restaurant charge, watching the full architecture of what had been happening inside my marriage resolve itself into a single, unbearable point of clarity. The sidewalk confirmed what I had already seen. The statement proved it. I did not confront him that day. I want to be entirely clear about that choice, because I know what some people think when they hear it. That waiting is weakness, that staying quiet is complicity. It was neither. It was precision. I understood that a confrontation from a position of partial information, with no legal structure in place and no plan for what came after, would hand Derek the opportunity to manage the situation in a way that served him and not me. And I had grown up watching my father approach broken things methodically. He always said you don't pick up a wire until you know where it runs. I was not picking up anything until I knew exactly where it ran. I called Jade. I told her everything. Not the edited version, the complete version. The gas station in October 2022, the deleted threads, the resort charge outside Boone, the company card I hadn't known about, and the Aria entry from September 13th with the date sitting there like a thing that had always been true and had simply been waiting for me to read it. Jade was quiet for a long time, long enough that I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" That is why she has been my closest friend for a decade. I said I needed an attorney before I did anything else. I needed to understand what North Carolina law entitled me to before a single word left my mouth to Derek. And I needed her to say nothing to anyone, not her sister, not her co-workers, not Marcus, not anyone, until I had a plan assembled. She said, "Already done. What else?" I called the law firm Hendricks and Cole on East 5th Street the next morning and made an appointment with a family law partner named Dana Cole. 14 years of practice, 200 divorce cases in her portfolio, and a manner in our first meeting that reminded me of Dr. Huang. Still, patient and capable of delivering hard information without softening it past the point of use. I laid out what I knew and what I suspected and what I had in writing. She told me what to do, and I did it with the same methodology I bring to any complex project. Systematically, without rushing interpretation, without letting my emotional state contaminate the process. Over the next 11 days, I built a document file. I found the second credit card in full, a card opened in Derek's name in January 2023, with the billing address set to the Callaway and Marsh office on South Tryon, carrying a balance of $31,400 accumulated over 14 months. I found a reservation record for the Highland Lake Inn in Flat Rock, the weekend in August 2023 that Derek had described as a development conference in Raleigh. I found a charge at a jewelry retailer on Providence Road for $890 in May of that year. I found restaurant charges and hotel incidentals, and the ARIA statement again, September 13th, 2023, this time with the full itemized receipt. 2 guests, 3 courses, 1 bottle of Barolo at $190. 11 months of a relationship living inside my marriage like a second structure, using the same calendar, supported by the same income, occupying the same weeks and weekends I had believed were accounted for. Dana looked at the file I brought her in mid-October and said it was among the cleanest documentation she had received from a non-attorney client. She asked if I was ready to proceed with filing. I said yes. In the meantime, our 4th anniversary was approaching. October 4th, 2024. On the morning of October 4th, I watched Derek take the charcoal blazer from the closet, hold it briefly, then hang it back with the comment that he was saving it for a dinner he'd planned for us that weekend to make up for a busy anniversary. He said this while looking into the closet, not at me. He seemed entirely at ease. He seemed like a man who had fully convinced himself that the version of events in his own head was sufficient. That evening, around 7:30, he texted me from wherever he was to say he was finishing an investor dinner and would be home by 9:30. No name, no location. He sent a heart emoji. I sent one back. I was at Pinnacle, working late on a client prototype, and I sat at my desk after reading his text and thought about the charcoal blazer. I thought about the ARIA charge from a year ago. I thought about Dana Cole's yellow legal pad and the document folder in my car. I had already made every decision I needed to make. The filing was underway, the apartment was rented in my name, everything that needed to be in place before I said a word to Derek was in place. There was nothing left that required more information. But there is a difference between knowing something as a pattern of evidence and knowing it as something that happened in front of your eyes. I had been living inside a pattern of evidence for 2 years. I wanted one moment of clarity that did not require inference. I drove to South Tryon Street, parked a block and a half east, walked. I want to be honest about my state of mind in that block and a half. I was calm in the specific way you are calm when the decision is already made, and all that remains is what you're about to see. My palms were dry. My breathing was even. I was a woman completing an experiment she had been running for 2 years. Aria's front wall is mostly glass, amber-lit inside, warm against the cool October street. I stopped on the sidewalk 15 feet from the entrance, far enough back that the light from inside didn't reach me, and I looked through the glass until I found the corner table near the far window. Derek was wearing the charcoal blazer. Across from him, with her hair pulled over her left shoulder, was Simone Park. She looked like her LinkedIn photo, and she looked comfortable, and she looked like someone who had been to this restaurant enough times to feel at home, in the particular corner where Derek always liked to sit. I watched him say something to her. I watched her laugh. I watched him reach across the table and push a strand of hair back from her face. Unhurried. Completely unconscious. The proprietary motion of someone who has touched another person that way many times before and expects to many times again. Then he leaned forward and kissed her. My phone buzzed. I looked down. Derek Calloway. Happy anniversary, baby. I know tonight got complicated with work, but I wanted you to know I love you more than anything. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Come home soon. I read it. I looked up. He was pulling back from her, reaching into his jacket pocket, putting his phone away after sending me those words. He said something to her. She smiled. He flagged the waiter with a small lift of his hand. I stood on that sidewalk and I let what I was seeing fully arrive. I did not look away. I did not perform the absence of reaction I might have performed in a different version of myself. I simply watched my husband finish texting his wife on their 4th anniversary and turn back to the woman he was with, and I let it be exactly what it was. I counted to some number, and then I turned and walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with both hands in my lap and the heat off. I thought about the card in my nightstand. I thought about Jade at lunch in February 2022, saying trust him until he gives you a reason not to. I thought about Dr. Huang asking me what I thought the gap between description and feeling was telling me. I texted Derek back. Thank you. Love you too. See you soon. He sent back a heart. Then nothing. I drove home, made tea, sat at the kitchen table in the house on Crestview Drive we had shared for 4 years, and thought with complete clarity about the sequence of steps I would now execute. He came home at 10:22. I heard the garage, the kitchen, the bathroom. He appeared in the bedroom doorway and looked at me in the dark. You're still awake, he said softly. Couldn't settle, I said. He got into bed and kissed my shoulder in the dark. Happy anniversary. I'm sorry tonight got away from me. You didn't miss much, I said. He fell asleep in approximately 9 minutes. I lay beside him and finalized the plan. I was not angry that night. I want to be precise about this because I think it matters. The anger came later, in a form that was cold and specific, and arrived without warning in ordinary moments. In the car, on the highway, at the kitchen counter, in a grocery store aisle with nothing particular to trigger it. What I felt that night was something more like the sensation of having been holding something heavy for so long that you've stopped registering the weight, and then setting it down, and feeling for the first time in years what your arms actually weigh on their own. 4 days after that, I signed the lease on an apartment on Hawthorne Lane in Plaza Midwood. 6th floor, 2 bedrooms, $1,920 a month. A kitchen window that faced east and caught the morning light in a way that felt, when I first stood in it, like a promise of something I couldn't yet name. Jade helped me move on a Saturday afternoon while Derek was at a property walk. We worked in the quiet, efficient companionship of 2 people who have known each other long enough to not need narration. We brought boxes upstairs and hung pictures on walls and drove to the Target on Central Avenue for a shower curtain and a dish rack and a set of towels in a shade of dusty blue I'd always liked, but had traded away in the early negotiations of our shared apartment. When we finished, she sat on my new couch and held a glass of wine and looked at me. How do you feel? She said. Like I've been holding my breath for 2 years, I said, and I just stopped. On November 12th, 2024, I drove to the house on Crestview Drive, waited for Derek to arrive home from work, and sat across from him at the kitchen table with a folder between us. The folder contained the credit card statements, the hotel records, the itemized restaurant charges, the Highland Lake Inn reservation in his name, and on the top page, in clear font, the contact information for Dana Cole at Hendricks and Cole. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. Something moved across his face. Not quite guilt yet. Not the performed kind. Recognition. The recognition of a man who suddenly understands that the thing he's been managing has stopped being manageable. Marlena, he said. You don't need to explain anything, I said. Dana Cole is my attorney. Her contact is on the first page. The documents are organized chronologically. He opened the folder. He looked at the first page for a long time in silence. When his eyes reached the September 13th ARIA charge, I'd tabbed that page specifically, set a small yellow sticky note at the margin. Something in his posture changed. Not dramatically. Just a slight lowering, like a structure acknowledging a load it can't carry. I'm sorry, he said. Not to buy time. Not to open a negotiation. He said it with his eyes on the page, in a way that told me he understood specifically what he was looking at, and what it meant that I had found it. Marlena, I'm genuinely sorry. I know you are, I said. I meant it. I have thought about that meaning a great deal since. I believe Derek Calloway felt genuine remorse. And I also believe he was a man who had wanted 2 things at once for over a year, lacked the courage to choose between them, and outsourced the choosing to circumstance. His remorse and his failure are not mutually exclusive. Most human damage is done by people who feel bad about it afterward. He began to say something about how it wasn't, how it had gotten complicated, how he had meant to. Derek. My voice was level. Not cold. Level. I'm not here to negotiate the narrative of what happened. I'm here to tell you the papers are filed, I've already moved out, and we need to establish how we handle the next 12 months. He pressed both hands flat on the kitchen table. He was quiet. Then he said, "You're already gone." Not as an accusation, as a recognition. "I've been gone for a while," I said. "I just didn't have somewhere to go yet." I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out of that house. Renata Calloway called me the following morning. She had clearly just spoken with Derek and was operating in her default mode of management, trying to establish the shape of the narrative before it established itself without her. But underneath the management, something in her voice was off. Something that I can only describe as shame. "He's a fool," she said. She said it quickly, in the tone of someone delivering a truth they don't intend to dwell on. He always had a fool's appetite for things he couldn't hold. Before she pivoted to logistics about what the family should say to various relatives, I said, "Renata, thank you for that." She was quiet for a moment. "You were a good wife to him, Marlena. Better than he deserved." Then she moved on to the logistics. I don't know what she knew before that morning, or whether the comment was guilt, or genuine regard, or the specific honesty that sometimes surfaces in people when they stop managing for a moment. But she said it, and I heard it, and I let it occupy the small space it needed to occupy. The winter of 2024 into 2025 was difficult in the way that matters. I want to be clear about that. I am not interested in describing recovery as something cleaner than it is. There were mornings in the Plaza Midwood apartment when the light came through the east-facing kitchen window and was beautiful, and I sat with cold coffee and felt a specific, quiet grief. Not for Derek precisely, but for the structure I had believed in. For the 4 years I had invested in a version of my future that had been built, partly, on something false. The grief was real and it was slow, and it did not resolve on a schedule. I went to Dr. Patricia Huang every Thursday on East Moorhead Street, and I did the work. I sat in the chair I'd been sitting in since late 2021, and I said out loud the things that needed to be said out loud about what it costs to trust someone for years who is not fully telling you the truth. The specific damage of that. The way sustained deception makes you distrust your own perception, makes you feel that the reliable instrument of your own observation cannot be trusted, is not something you resolve in a season. It takes longer than that. It takes sitting with someone who will not let you minimize it. In February 2025, Dr. Huang said something I've kept. "Marlena, most people in your situation fall apart at the moment of discovery and start rebuilding from rubble. You gathered information for 2 years, built a legal file, secured your housing, and confronted him from a position of clarity. You didn't lose control once. That's not just resilience. That's a woman who knew exactly what she was made of, even while the person closest to her was lying." I told her I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired and sad and like years of my life had been taken. She said, "Those aren't mutually exclusive." She says things like that. And she's right every time, and it's extremely inconvenient. At Pinnacle, something changed in the winter of 2024 that I had not anticipated. I had been splitting my attention for years without fully naming it. The ambient weight of a marriage you don't entirely trust sits in you like low-grade fever. You function, but never at full capacity. You conserve energy for the ongoing management of your own internal weather. When there was nothing left to manage, I stopped splitting. The primary mobile banking interface at Pinnacle had needed a complete redesign for nearly 2 years. 2 previous project leads had touched it without resolution. My manager, Dara Ellison, handed it to me in November 2024 with a 14-week deadline and a tone that suggested she wasn't certain it was achievable in that window. I delivered the finished redesign in 10 weeks and 4 days. Post-launch user satisfaction scores moved from 58% to 83% in the first quarter. In March 2025, Dara closed her office door, sat across from me, and told me she was recommending me for Director of User Experience, a role that had been vacant for 11 months and posted twice without being filled to her satisfaction. The promotion was official on April 7, 2025. My salary moved from $94,000 to $131,000. I was given a corner office on the 7th floor of the Pinnacle building on College Street, with 2 windows, a door that closes, and my name on the directory in a font I privately think is too small, but have not yet moved to change. I bought flowers on the drive home. Peonies from the farmer's market on Central Avenue. Pink, the expensive kind that I'd spent years walking past, because buying them for myself felt indulgent in a way I couldn't fully justify. I put them in a vase on the kitchen table of my Plaza Midwood apartment and sat there for a while, just looking at them. Jade came over that evening. We opened a bottle of wine I paid $62 for, which was more than I had ever spent on a single bottle in my life, without an occasion requiring it. And we sat on my couch, and she raised her glass and looked at me and said, "To Marlena Voss," which is who she always was. She knew I'd already reclaimed my name, quietly, on a Tuesday morning, at the county courthouse, in a form I filled out in 15 minutes, and which required no drama and no announcement, just a name returning to the person it had always belonged to. I cried a little then. Not about him. About the flowers and the name and the morning light through the east window and the decade of careful, patient, unglamorous work that had built something no one could take from me because no one had given it to me. The divorce was finalized on November 18th, 2025. 13 months and 14 days after I walked out of the house on Crestview Drive. The settlement was orderly. The house sold. Proceeds split. Joint accounts divided. I walked away with $71,000 in liquid assets, my retirement account intact at $67,000, and the furniture I had chosen for the apartment. Derek took the BMW and whatever arrangement he and Simone Park were building together. I made a deliberate decision not to know anything about what that looked like, and I have kept that decision without exception. It is March 2026. I'm sitting at my kitchen table in Plaza Midwood with the window cracked and the early spring air coming through. Still cool in the shade, but with something changing in the light that tells you the season has made up its mind. I bought peonies yesterday at the Central Avenue Farmers Market. Pink ones, the expensive kind. They're in the vase on the table. They'll last about a week. I'll buy more when they go. My name is Marlena Voss. It fits the way it always did, the way a name fits when it is genuinely and entirely yours. Jade got engaged in January 2026 to a structural engineer named Marcus Tillman, who tears up at dogs in films and makes her put her drink down when he says something funny, which, she has told me, is a problem she is fully prepared to have for the rest of her life. I am her maid of honor and I take the job seriously. We looked at venues last weekend. A garden event space in South End with string lights over an outdoor courtyard and a bridal suite with excellent light. I drove home afterward with the windows down even though it was cold. Because the city looked beautiful at night coming over the bridge, and I didn't want to be sealed inside anything. Dr. Huang asked me in our session last month what I would say to the woman standing on that sidewalk in October 2024. The woman with her phone in her hand and 31 words on the screen, watching through amber-lit glass. I thought about it longer than I expected to. I'd say, "You're going to feel this for longer than you want to. Not all of it at once. In installments. In the car on the highway. In the cereal aisle at Harris Teeter. in the 15 seconds between waking up and remembering. Let it come when it comes. Don't perform moving on at a pace that isn't real. But here is the most important thing I want you to know. Standing there on that sidewalk in October, he was never the source of what you are. You confused his attention for the thing itself. He paid close attention because you were worth paying close attention to, and somewhere along the way, he stopped being worthy of the person he was watching. That is his failure, entirely. You are the thing itself. You have been the thing itself for 34 years. That doesn't change because someone chose to lie inside it. She already knew this. She just needed time to feel it rather than only think it. So here's what I'll leave you with. I did not win through exposure or confrontation or making Derek Calloway feel, publicly, the full weight of what he did. There was no dramatic scene at a family gathering. No moment where the truth detonated in front of witnesses. He learned what I knew from a folder on a kitchen table, with only the two of us present, in a room that was already, by that point, a place I was leaving. I did not destroy him. I did not need to. I finished what I was building, reclaimed my name, and became someone who does not require him to feel bad in order to feel good. That is the choice I made. It is quiet. It has held. The text is still in my phone. I've never deleted it. I almost never look at it. But I know it's there. 31 words sent from a corner table at Aria on South Tryon Street on an October evening when the olive trees were still in their pots by the entrance, and the jazz quartet down the block was still playing, and a man was kissing one woman while texting another on what was supposed to be the night they were celebrating 4 years of choosing each other. I walk past that restaurant sometimes. The host still stands near the door in the evenings. The lighting is still amber. I've walked past it enough times now that it is just a restaurant. If any part of this is yours, if you've ever stood somewhere cold, reading something that didn't match what was right in front of you, trying to decide what to do with what you already know, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Leave a comment. I mean it. I read them. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description.